Hey, Sin Bin fans, if you haven't heard, the best place... Pretend like you didn't see that or hear it. Let's try this. I didn't even start the thing. Okay, here we go. The best place... Pretend like you didn't see that. 3 topics, 60 minutes, covering the biggest news in the ECHL. This is the 3 Periods Podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Matthew Will and Matthew Harding.
And we're back for another edition of the 3 Periods Podcast. And because all of you asked, we're 28 days away from regular season ECHL hockey. We'll keep counting you down. We're counting down, so you're counting down with us. I'm joined by Matthew Harding once again. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right, buddy. How are you?
Doing well. Life's getting good.
Yes.
Obviously, for us Wichita people, our Wichita Wind Surge are on the cusp of elimination, but trying to win a division title in their very first year. That starts tomorrow night, so that'll be exciting to see. And as for the hockey world, NHL training camps are getting started today. It's been a fun day to sit on Twitter all day and listen to the takes of the beat writers.
Yes.
It was fun to see Nolan Patrick shout out that the Vegas Golden Knight fans were fun to have in practice.
Mm-hmm.
It really made Flyers Twitter come alive, so that was fun. And of course, as those get finished up, AHL camps will get started. That's when we'll really start getting a little bit more hands-on and taking a look at those. And then, of course, ECHL training camp going to be here before we know it. And we've got a loaded show for you tonight. We'll have a loaded show for you in 2 weeks' time.
Mm-hmm.
And then before we know it, right after that, we're getting you set for the night before the season starts. And it's going to be a wild ride to the finish. So a lot to go over, I think, in a couple of weeks that you and I didn't really expect to be very loaded up. First thing we want to get going on is that we've got ice getting laid at some of these arenas. And if that doesn't excite you, I don't know what can, because that's the big step in getting there and in avoiding an Ice Gate 3.0, right?
That's right. And you'll have to excuse the somebody is out here outside of my window. By the way, it is nice and refreshingly cool. Somebody's out here with a weed eater, and I have the windows open because it is 70, 75 degrees, 80 degrees here. So if you hear something that sounds like a weed eater, that's exactly what it is.
So far, I think we're okay.
Okay, good deal. It's I believe it's my wife who's actually weed eating outside.
Shout out to
we were having a podcast, yet she's weed eating.
Hey, shout out.
The outside. Well done, honey. Well done.
We're thankful.
That's all right. But yeah, to your point, we have some B-roll to show you from our good friends with the Reading Royals, the new broadcaster there, Dylan Coyle, sending this along in an email last week of the ice getting painted and laid down there in Reading. They've been very busy this year with free agency, and so it's good to see hockey back in Reading, Pennsylvania, and it's good to see hockey back in those arenas that were quiet last year with the pandemic. So good to see everybody in there painting the ice. This is really good material, by the way, if you're looking for content this time of the year, and it's a struggle at this point, I guess. This is really great content to have. So a good look at watching them bring out the 20th anniversary logo and lay that at center beautiful. Ice. This is a beautiful logo. I mean, I kind of get chills here. There's no ice here. They're all walking on it, but I kind of get chills.
Yeah. And this is a Reading team that it was unfortunate we didn't get to watch them last year. Maybe it's because I'm a little impartial because they're with Philadelphia, but I think this is one of the strongest NHL, AHL, ECHL affiliations out there, because a lot of it's probably because of location, but it's one of the best working affiliations. We get to see a lot of, as a Philly fan, I get to see a lot of our prospects play in both Lehigh Valley and Reading.
Yeah.
And they do it really well. So I'm excited to see Reading come back. I'm excited to see the whole North Division come back, because this league is infinitely better with that division in it. So Trois-Rivières is going to bring something brand new. Newfoundland's going for a title defense, question mark. I mean, kind of.
Can you I don't know if you can consider that a title defense. Like the people
There's
up
no
there
way.
definitely would consider it a title defense, and maybe, but I mean, I'm sorry, there was a full season played last year, and there was a champion.
So are we needing a Newfoundland Fort Wayne final?
Ooh. Don't
For bragging rights, of course.
Don't tempt me. You know what it should be though? Like if they were if somebody really creative and if vaccination didn't matter or anything like that, if COVID was really over, like the thing to do would be to have Newfoundland and Fort Wayne meet in Reading, a neutral place, and play a best of 3.
That'd be fun.
How do you say no to that?
That would be fun. Even if it's just like a preseason bout.
Absolutely. Oh
That'd
yeah,
be
it'd be a preseason bout. I mean, you're not gonna have those games count.
Yeah.
But that would be fun.
And I think moving towards a regular season idea, it's going to be really cool to see what happens in this league in the next few years if we can get some more interconference play happening. I mean, Wichita,
Yes.
We talk about in Wichita, how cool would it be to get to go down to Florida and play Jacksonville, South Carolina, the Everblades, Savannah starting next year. I mean, it would be really cool to do a little trip, and kind of like how the NHL clubs on the East Coast go do a West Coast trip once a year. I think it'd be fun to see a team get to do a Canada trip and go play Trois-Rivières and stop by Newfoundland and get to go hit some of those places. It'd be a unique idea, but it'd be tough.
Well, Newfoundland does come to Wichita this year.
That is true.
Good Lord pending. Good Lord willing here. But we'll get to see the Growlers and former Thunder forward Zach O'Brien on that squad. So we'll get to see them come through here this year as well. But you're right. And I was looking at this for some background research about January, and it is a 19-hour drive from Wichita to Jacksonville, Florida. I can make that.
We can make it. Simple enough.
Yeah. So it can happen.
Well, probably the biggest news out of the last 2 weeks is that the Tulsa Oilers have been sold, per se.
Yes.
The controlling interest has been moved from the Stevens Brothers Sports Management Group, who used to own the Allen team and currently still owns the Wichita team, over to NL Sports, who is owned by Annie Skirdo. I want to hear your thoughts on this because you and I have not talked about this at all since it happened.
I read up on Andy's background, and it sounds like he's a forward-thinking owner, and I think that is what this league is needing. And I've got to kind of dance around this a little bit. So it's good that the Stephen brothers are back to owning one franchise. We talk about teams having multiple owners, and I think that if you get into that mindset of having multiple ownerships within the same ownership group, multiple teams within the same ownership group, you kind of dilute the resources. So now all of those resources can be focused back into the Wichita Thunder for something that they really haven't had for a number of years. I'm interested to see how that happens this year. I'm interested to see what strides Tulsa takes in year one under this NL Sports ownership, and the strides that they make in the offseason next year, because this happens so late in this offseason that the tentacles of the previous ownership will still be on the ice here in the next couple of weeks and in through this season. Now you really have to look at what happens next offseason and moving forward, the improvements that are made in the ownership, in the front office and things like that. Taylor Hall is a bright general manager. They have a good group of folks in that front office down there, with the face of their front office being Zach Reynolds, the voice of the Tulsa Oilers, who we hope to have on the pod here at some point this year. So I think that it will be interesting to see what happens, how Tulsa kind of breaks away and gets more into the NL Sports swing of things than they were the Stephen brothers. But for Wichita fans, I think that that this is a sign that maybe there could be some hope that they pour more resources back into the Thunder and the operation of making the Thunder a little bit more of a fan friendly, of a not necessarily a fan friendly, but publicizing the Thunder more on TV and radio and billboards and things like that. Stuff that is just absent here in this market.
Well, and this is a Tulsa team who, after missing the playoffs 3 straight years, 200 Jason Christie, and then the first year of Rob Murray's tenure,
Mm-hmm.
had an unreal year in 18-19, lost
Yeah.
in the third round of the playoffs, uh, almost hit the 100-point mark in the regular season. Then we had the year that COVID hit, and they looked like they were on their way to another pretty good year. They were sitting above 500.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, had there been individual divisions and not just two big conferences, they would likely have been a playoff team.
Right.
So this is a Tulsa team that's moving in the right direction, and I think this gives them the opportunity to have, you put it best, I think, resources applied to them and them only, and give
Right.
them the opportunity to strive uh, as one. And I think this is
Right.
something that is going to strengthen the entire Mountain Division and ECHL. This is not the only, or was not the only ownership group that owned multiple teams. It's all over the ECHL.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that I think if the league continues to continue finding new owners to bring in, I think it just diversifies the group and gets more voices in there, which is important.
Absolutely. And the tentacles of those voices in the room, like Andy Skirdo has ties to women's hockey. So is there something that the ECHL is doing that he can apply to his women's hockey teams, or is there something that's going on over there that he can bring over here? All of those things are definitely in play there. And I completely agree with the diversification of voices in the room, in the Board of Governors room, whenever they have their meetings. So it's a new day for the Tulsa Oilers. And, to your earlier point about resources and things like that, I think that this brings up kind of an interesting point, and we'll dive into this here in just a little bit. But I think we're going to look at it at affiliations completely different this year than we did last year. Like, there were some teams that sent players down early, and then when the American Hockey League started, everybody went back up. I don't think that we're going to see that with as much volume this year. So I do think that the Tulsa Oilers will get a lot more help from Anaheim than they did last season. And I think that ultimately makes Tulsa an even more dangerous team, because if that team with very little help from Anaheim last year put a charge into the fourth playoff spot, imagine what they can do if they have 3, 4, 5 Anaheim players on that roster all year long.
Yeah, and I think that affiliations are going to start looking a little different, especially because of the teams who had to take a year off.
Yeah.
I would really like to see affiliations grow into long-term relationships. That's something we see in the AHL a ton with
Right.
teams that are really partnered with their NHL group, but it doesn't seem like there's really that strong partnership when you get down to this level. And maybe that's just
No.
because the ECHL is still making a name for itself as a developmental league and still fairly new into this affiliation thing. We're
Well,
only 5 or 6 years in.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's necessarily that. I agree with you completely. I would like to see NHL resources come down to help cultivate the next group of people who are coming up.
Yeah.
If it's a true affiliation, let's take Wichita, for example. If it's a true affiliation, then those people at the top in Edmonton, the Bill Scotts, the Ken Hollands even of the world, should come down and find out what's going on at the grassroots level of the organizations that they're paired with, and develop those people. Develop broadcasters, develop equipment managers, develop salespeople. All of that stuff needs to be done organically through the affiliation. It needs to be a true affiliation. And to your point, the ECHL doesn't have that. There are no true affiliations here, and I'm not even really sure that happens in the American Hockey League all that often. It probably does with the NHL owned AHL franchises.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So I think that you would need to have more NHL ownership at the ECHL level and the American Hockey League level for that true development to take place. But until then, Um, and this isn't a knock on anybody moving up. There have been quite a lot of moves over the last several days, last several weeks. Look at coaches, broadcasters, equipment managers, things like that. But I'm talking about on a whole scale. If you want true development from top to bottom and not just players on the ice, then it needs to happen in the boardrooms and in the offices as well.
And the one I mentioned earlier, Reading, is the one that it's the only one I can think of right away as a affiliation that has really worked in the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because you do see Philly put a lot of the 5th, 6th, 7th round draft picks down there and cultivate them to get them ready for the AHL.
Right.
I think that's something that if maybe give him 3 years and have these NHL teams sign these affiliations for 3 or 4 years and give yourself time to really cultivate it. I think we saw it in the Wichita Ottawa relationship that it got off to such a rough start that there was nothing to grow from.
Right.
So the Edmonton Wichita one, the one that applies to you and I the best, it started off with right away a couple of goalies sent all the way down, and that they were the ones who pretty much sat with the team for a long time. And it automatically put this thought into Wichita and Bakersfield's minds that, we're going to find a way to help you. Last year was tough. I think COVID had a lot to do with it. And I think the thing that had the most impact last year was taxi squads. I think that absolutely ruined affiliations for ECHL teams.
Yes.
As far as I know, the taxi squads are gone for this year.
Yeah. But what I will say though is that you and I both agreed on this when we sat in Intrust Bank Arena and we watched every Western Conference team come through here last year, that the level of play was never as high as it was last year.
Absolutely not.
High watermark for that.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I kind of shy away. I mean, this is kind of the elephant in the room, but you're going to go from watching that in June and all of last year to watching something that is considerably less here in a few weeks. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, you went from 13 teams to 27 teams and you added 2. So the talent pool on that face is going to be diluted a little bit. Plus the affiliations.
I think if the ECHL reminds themselves that they're in a true developmental league, that's the way to approach this year. That even though the hockey level might not be as high as it usually or as it was last year because of all those per se European players that got to come over. I think you're really able to look at it and say, while we're not at that level, we have so many young, talented players that are building their hockey skills for the next level. I think that's going to be the approach that can keep the positive spin on it. We've already seen it from a couple teams to start in free agency teams are picking up guys from the SPHL. I think we're finally seeing the SPHL be a little bit of a talent pool even for the ECHL. So it's something that slowly but surely we have to readjust ourselves to a developmental league mentality.
Yeah, and we'll give you some reasons why the exodus has been so pronounced here for at least a couple of teams in just a few minutes. But and I don't want to talk about this before we get there, but Europe opening up has a big deal to do with the exodus of players this year. So like I said, we'll talk about that coming up here in just a little bit. But you're right. You have to go back from saying, okay, now we can have all of these European players or players that we're going to be over there. They can come back over here and play this year and get a paycheck. Now you're losing that again. And it's going to be that frame of mindset that you have to shift back to. And I think that we will see that. It's going to take a little bit of time. And you're right about the development of the talent pool in the SPHL this year. So good to see the minor league hockey in all 3 levels are starting to work back together again.
Yeah, like you mentioned, we will come back to this in our second period about what's happened in the ECHL and the exodus of players to Europe. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. I want to keep going on what's new in the ECHL. On the coaching carousel in the last 2 weeks, probably one that took a lot of us by shock is that Tim Branham in Utah has been named an assistant coach up at AHL Colorado, the Eagles. And that happened on September 13th. Once again, another topic that you and I really haven't had time to talk much about. So I'm eager to hear your thoughts on it and what it maybe lays back in Utah for this upcoming year.
Well, I think if you kind of see what's happening globally in Columbus, and then you see what happened with the Colorado Avalanche firing an Eagles an Eagles assistant coach because they wouldn't get the vaccine, and everybody needed to be vaccinated to have contact with the players. I think that is the door that opened up for Tim Branham to get there. And Tim Branham is was for Utah a very solid head coach.
Oh yeah.
You and I have watched him over the last 2 or 3 years really kind of hone his craft there behind the bench in Utah and become a very, very good head coach. X's and O's orientated. Probably not maybe one of the best interviews we've ever had, but he's a really good, smart guy, and I think that he's going to be a huge addition to the Eagles organization moving forward. Hate it that it had to happen this way, but the situation is what it is, and Tim Branham is now up in Colorado with the American Hockey League. What this does is it kind of creates an opening for Ryan Knazewicz to become the new head coach of the Utah Grizzlies. And I think that being this close to the season, he probably will get that job. But I think you got to kind of run it through some back channels and get Colorado's blessing on it before anything like that happens, which is why you haven't seen that yet. But I think sooner rather than later, you're going to see that Ryan Knazewicz is going to be the head coach of the Utah Grizzlies.
Do you think we see him get the interim tag for a little bit and then they promote it all the way, or are they waiting for the full
No,
thing?
he's had a long enough tenure behind the bench with Tim Branham that he knows what kind of system he wants to run. I think you give him a little bit of a runway, but I think that there's no interim tag. The only way that there would have been an interim tag is if Branham had gotten the job in season, I think.
Gotcha.
And then you may have used the offseason to go look for somebody better. But with it being this late in the year and there are still players out there and you want to bring them in, if players want to see stability at this point in the game, and if you have an interim tag on a guy, there's probably not that stability. So I think you're going to just, here's the head coach, no tag, and there you go.
Tim Branham has been with the Utah Grizzlies as their head coach since the 13-14 season, only missed the playoff 2 years. One of them was 17-18. The second one was the COVID year where we stopped early. A guy who almost has the Steve Martinson style team that every time you see him on the schedule, you've got to bring everything you've got, or else he'll be real quick to add 3 losses to your weekend.
Yes, absolutely. A very cerebral mindset there with Tim Branham.
Well, our congratulations to Tim Branham. We know he's going to do a great job in the AHL. Just another coach this offseason who's been promoted from the E to the A. We said we had a long conversation with the commissioner about it a couple weeks ago. This is not just the developmental league for players. We've got broadcasters, we've got coaches, we've got equipment managers. Everyone is finally using these affiliations to move on up, and this is great to see.
Yeah.
The next piece I want to touch on is that this just happened 2 days ago that the ECHL announced the preseason schedule for the upcoming year. And there's a couple games on here that I've had circled since I heard them announced.
All right.
I would bet they're pretty close to yours. October 15th and 16th, that Friday, Saturday, down in Atlanta, the Greenville Swamp Rabbits and Atlanta Gladiators will be hosting Anyang Hala from Korea.
Yes.
To play a couple of games. And this is a home run for the ECHL. This is awesome because I think you're bringing exposure to another hockey league here, and you're bringing exposure about the ECHL there.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is awesome, and I want to hear what you think as well.
I agree. Home run for the ECHL, and if you get a chance to look at potential talent from overseas as well, maybe another recruiting place that you want to bring in over the next several years. So home run for the ECHL, exposure internationally, and exposure for the team coming over. Anyang Hala from Korea over here stateside.
Not every single team is playing a preseason game. One more you might want to circle. Iowa gets their very first opportunity to touch the ice on October 15th. They'll be in Kansas City, play at 7:10 there on the 15th. It'll be exciting to see one of the two brand new teams hit the ice for the first time, even if it is just a preseason game. So excited for that one as well. Go ahead.
No, indeed. I'm just agreeing with you there.
Just announced a couple days earlier on Monday, September 20th, Howie's Hockey Tape was re-signed as the official hockey tape and lace supplier of the ECHL, and they'll also be the name sponsor of the ECHL Rookie of the Month Award. It's great to see the ECHL is keeping these high-level groups as partners in the quotes that they had from both Ryan Creelan and the representatives from Howie's. It sounds like that relationship's at an all-time high, and that's good for the ECHL, and it's good for Howie's.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime that you can bring in more partners and have them sign long-term, that's better for business as it is.
Well, we're into the final minute of the first period, and they say that the most important goals to happen are in the last minute of the period and the first minute of the period.
Yes.
So this might be the most important topic we talk about if that's the way you think of it. This is Rate Those Threads. One of the things that came out on September 3rd, since our last podcast, the Iowa Heartlanders released what their jerseys would look like for their very first season. And I have to say, I'm impressed. I think they look real nice.
All right. I'm going to share the threads on our show, on our live feed that you're watching on YouTube, Facebook Live, and on the 3 Periods podcast Twitter feed. These are the threads. Sign me up. Those are slick.
That white one is beautiful.
Yup.
They have made the most of their couple of logos. You and I made the joke with the black one that we knew they were going to have gray lettering on the back because it seems like every team that has a black jersey in the league has lettering on the back that's so hard to read.
Yeah,
but
we saw a few teams last year come through here with letters that you needed an eye chart for.
Yeah. Now these are going to be ones that it doesn't matter if you're a Wichita fan or a Florida fan, you might want to cop one of these up. So
I'm going to.
I think they look very nice, and I'm eager to see what they look like on the ice as well. October 15th, might need to pop up to Kansas City to take a look at these on the ice, right?
But they'll probably be sporting practice jerseys, not these.
Yeah.
If it's anything like preseason that I come to know and love every year, yes, it will be practice jersey central up there in Kansas City.
Although maybe the practice jerseys are even better.
Oh,
maybe we've got something with the secondary logo working on the practice jerseys.
Oh man, yeah.
Someone's got to go to an Iowa practice and send us a picture so we know.
Absolutely. Hit us up if you're an Iowa fan and go to a camp day there. Hit us up at 3 Periods Pod on Twitter, and we'll give you credit.
Yeah, we got to see those.
Give me a grade on these, A through F. What do you think?
To allow room for the best of the best, it's an A-. Because I think there's a couple of jerseys throughout this league that are really nice, that belong in the same talk. But I think you've got to give just enough room for the best of the best. But these are very nice in my book.
I'm going to go B+. These are solid B+ jerseys. You're right. You save the A's for the best of the best.
I finally got to move Wichita up last year because I think the change from a black jersey to a blue jersey was exactly what the doctor ordered. And it kind of fit into the bill with the Toronto affiliation we had last year.
It did.
It was kind of unique there as well. So
yeah.
Well, with that, the buzzer sounds on the first period, and we move into the second period where talks get a little more serious, and we talk about further what has happened here in the ECHL in the offseason and the exodus of players, whether it be retirement or moving up to the AHL, or the number one reason, a lot of players headed overseas now that the COVID pandemic maybe is on the way down and Europe has opened up. We know that part is not a maybe, and that these teams are playing. And you're seeing a lot of players kind of go to the same places, almost like they'd still like to play with one another, but it's just it's those big leagues we knew we're going to have a lot of people. Slovakia, Sweden, Switzerland have brought a lot of players over.
Mm-hmm.
The two teams that I picked aside for us to really kind of break down and look at are two that I think are easier for you and I to talk about, and are the two that I think have been the most affected, and that's the Wichita Thunder, and then even more so the Allen Americans.
All right.
For Wichita, Anthony Beauregard heads overseas to Switzerland. Ryan White heads back up to Manitoba. He's going to be a coach. Matthew Gagnon, of course, stays in the ECHL. He's going to Trois-Rivières. Bo Starrett elects retirement. Riley Weslowski moves up to coaching. He's going to be up in Kansas City as an assistant coach. Stephen Fournier, one of the biggest ECHL breaking news points of the last few weeks, after signing in Wichita, signs to go over to Slovakia. And then Mateo Gennaro and Dean Stewart are both in the AHL and have a potential of not coming back down to Wichita. Before we move on to Allen, that is a lot of talent, not only gone from Wichita stateside, but also overseas.
Yeah. I wrote about this on Wednesday at fieldpasshockey.com, and we'll link to it in the podcast write-up for the show. But the Thunder, if they don't get any of those players back, Mateo Gennaro, Dean Stewart, or any of the others, will have lost 40% of their total offense from 1 year ago. And then there are the losses of Gagnon and Weslowski in the locker room, and really the bridge that Stephen Fournier built from the coach's office to the locker room. Stephen Fournier was a captain without being a captain. So, you look at those losses for the Thunder, those are huge losses. And, I think that Thunder fans have a right to be a little concerned about this. Had you brought everybody back and then you added some more players or added some depth pieces to this, I think it would have been perfectly fine. It would have been an A+ or whatever. But to lose this much and lose Stephen Fournier at a critical juncture of the offseason, series of gut punches that I don't know if the Thunder can recover from right now. But you and I laid out yesterday, you and I talked about this in a chat, and I, kind of laid out for you what I thought Bruce Ramsey might do. And I think that there are still, one or two big signings coming for the Wichita Thunder. You look at last year, and this is a good case history. Last year, he had 4 big signings: Evan Winiger, Anthony Beauregard, Mateo Gennaro, and there was one more here.
I believe it was Jacob Graves.
Jacob Graves, yeah. All of those came in the last month to 6 weeks of the offseason. They announced Jacob Graves on the training camp roster when they released the training camp roster. So that signing, if Thunder fans are worried about Jacob Graves, I'm confident he'll sign. It's just a matter of he kind of works on his own clock. So, I think Thunder fans are right to be a little concerned about it because, you and I both know this intimately from our years of covering the Thunder. This fan base craves winning hockey. I think that this fan base craves having a say in what happens in the league rather than being a doormat. And I think you can say that for any other fan base, but it is especially true in Wichita. They have been the doormat more than they have had a say in who wins a championship. So, they get a taste of it 1 year with Malcolm Cameron. He drives the team in the toilet the next year. You bring in Bruce Ramsey, you start the rebuild. The rebuild hits a gear with COVID. Even in a COVID year, they still rack up 90 points, better than Malcolm Cameron, by the way. better than Malcolm Cameron could ever do in a Thunder uniform or behind a Thunder bench, and they still lose. And then you lose all of these players. If you're a Thunder fan, you're kind of wondering, like, what is it about us that you don't want to be here? So, from that angle, I completely understand. But Bruce Ramsey is a really good recruiter, and he kind of keeps things tight to the vest. And I think that there are still some big chips yet coming for Wichita. And I think that he'll scour whatever comes through the AHL market, through the AHL training camp cuts, and whatever happens in the ECHL. And maybe there's a side deal with another ECHL team. We don't know. Or with another NHL team. We don't know. But I guess the thing that I need, the thing that kind of has struck me in the conversations that I've had is, yes, it's been a tough summer, but I don't think that Bruce Ramsey's rattled. He doesn't come
absolutely
across that
not.
way. But not seeing high-level names to replace what you've lost still. If I'm a Thunder fan, I have every right to be like, hey, what's going on here?
We know that players like playing for Bruce Ramsey. You and I make it a point every time we interview a Wichita player to ask, what is it like to play for Bruce Ramsey? And we get the exact same answer every single time. It's the best coach I've ever played for because he lets me make mistakes and lets me grow from them.
Right.
And a coach like that is not going to have a team full of third and fourth liners. I promise that.
Yeah.
There is still plenty of time, 28 days until we drop the puck for the first time on an opening night game.
Right.
We've got time.
Well, yeah.
He's got time. Utah's got time.
Yep.
There's a lot of teams throughout the league who definitely don't have the rosters that they imagine they'd have. We all just need to take a deep breath, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that, once the calendar turns to October, we're going to see big signing, big signing, big signing, big signing,
Yeah.
big signing. It's going to come in a wave. And
Yeah.
I think that this is going to be a wave that will probably be pretty high. Not necessarily one of those ripples. This is going to be a full-on wave. So Tulsa's not announced hardly any of their veterans yet, talking about the Tulsa Oilers. That's something that a change in ownership probably they go back and say to an Adam Pleskash, hey, come on back one more year. Or, Steve Martinson has on the face, on the outside, not really done a whole lot this year in free agency. Does he go out and land 4 vets now that, time is getting limited? The recruiting trail is going to get very hot here as we lead into ECHL camps and as we see what shakes out from AHL camps as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of talent out there still, and a guy like Bruce Ramsey is going to work to the last second to make sure that his team is as good as possible.
Right, but do you? Let me ask you this, because you've been there with me covering the Thunder beat for the last few years. Do you feel like that the Thunder fans are justified in feeling a little uneasy about this?
Yeah, I do, and ever since some of these big losses have happened, I've tried to look around at other fan bases around the ECHL when some of their big names have gotten suddenly taken away, just to see what it kind of looks like in other fan bases. And Wichita's right on line with some of those other franchises. We're not the only one in the ECHL having to deal with this. And I think Wichita fans need to maybe see that through another team's eyes, is that every team is going through this exodus kind of feeling. Maybe Fort Wayne's one of the ones I can look at and say they're bringing back a really solid group from their internal, their basic group from last year.
Yeah.
But I think that there's still positivity there. I think Wichita fans are justified because they're not used to seeing this much talent at a team suddenly vanish.
Yeah.
Any franchise is going to be concerned when they see this much high caliber talent suddenly go away. But we knew that was going to happen throughout last year. So I'm okay with it. I know that maybe the first couple weeks are going to be hard to adjust. This league's going to balance out. I know that's going to happen come mid-November probably.
Yeah. As one of our old colleagues, Mike Campos, used to say, everybody will regress to the mean.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. So, My wife is mowing the lawn. 7:40 in the evening. Anyway, I don't know why she's mowing the lawn, but anyway, yeah, I think that you're going to see teams kind of in fits and starts, but overall everybody kind of regresses back to the mean, and the top end teams will shake out, and the top end teams, this is kind of seems a little blasé to say, because I kind of want a shakeup of the hierarchy in the ECHL, but I feel like we're going to just go right back to a Florida, South Carolina, Toledo, Fort Wayne, Adirondack, Newfoundland will be there, Idaho, Utah, Allen, those kinds of teams with no real shakeup at all in that group, and that's going to be where the championship is won through those 8 to 10 teams next year. And if you're one of those fans on the outside, if you're a fan from one of those teams that are on the outside looking in, I could see where, the ECHL may not be that fun to watch, because it's the same. You're passing the same trophy around to 10 teams every other to the same 10 teams.
Yeah. And that's,
but yeah,
I think one of the things that I've noticed is the surge that both Greenville and Fort Wayne had last year.
Yeah.
And both of them were able to bring back big names that their fans know and that can really lead those two teams. And I think maybe slowly we're starting to get a couple teams really make names for themselves. I don't think those two teams are going to be out of the conversation. In fact, I think both teams are going to be in the conversation to win their divisions next year, when 3 or 4 years ago, we would not even think of them as sitting atop their division. So
yeah,
I think maybe one team at a time, we just have to let it happen. For all we know, Wichita could suddenly use some of these young kids to surge to the top of the division, and suddenly that COVID year has proved valuable for them as well. Mm-hmm. It's very possible some of these teams are just on their way up. Now that we're sitting in year 7 or 8 of the CHL and ECHL merger, we're finally starting to see these teams have their unique identity within the ECHL. I think the first couple of years they were still struggling to be recognized as an ECHL team and not just one of the expansion teams.
Sure.
So I think you're finally starting to see it become one league, and I think slowly but surely we're starting to see the pedigree passed around.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. But you're right; it's going to be a slow passing to the next echelon of teams.
Oh yeah.
So
we won't spend too much time on Allen, but yeah, I think it's worth noticing and recognizing the talent they lost and the names they lost.
Mm-hmm.
Corey Mackin and Chad Butcher are both headed to HC Vita Haston in Sweden. Matt Register and Josh Lamon are both headed to Wales to play for the Cardiff Devils. Scott Conway and Sam Rupp are both heading to Northern Ireland to play for Belfast Giants. Les Lancaster is headed to Finland to play for Ives. Steve Orr is headed to France to play for Sergi Pontoy. Tyler Sheehy is headed to Germany to play for the Nuremberg Ice Tigers, a pretty big German team over there. Colin Shirley headed to Poland. CJ Mott headed to England. Jake Patterson headed to Norway. Dyson Stevenson getting back together with old Thunder coach there at Glasgow Clan in Scotland. And Zane Franklin is headed back to college up in Canada. That is a ton of talent off of Steve Martinson's roster.
Yeah, you lose the defenseman of the year in Les Lancaster. You lose an American Hockey League goalie in CJ Mott. You lose your heart and soul guy in Zane Franklin and Dyson Stevenson. I'm convinced Zane Franklin was the next Dyson Stevenson for that franchise. Yeah. I really love the way he played. He reminded me a lot of a younger Dyson Stevenson. You lose Corey Mackin and Chad Butcher, both of them really turned it on offensively at the end of the year. And you lose all of this and you don't backfill it with an affiliation. But there are tea leaves that you can read that would lead one to believe that maybe the Allen Americans could be working with Seattle. Francis Marat, who signed in Allen earlier this week, is on Seattle's training camp roster right now up in the NHL. So maybe could there be something going on there between those two teams? We don't know, nor no formal announcement yet. But to have for the Allen Americans to be 28 days away from playing ECHL hockey and not having an affiliation is not good, Bob.
It's something that I wanted to make sure we mentioned just to get to the attention of people that your team is not the only team going through this.
Correct.
And some teams are having it a little worse than others.
Yeah.
But I'll touch on it in our third segment. I have not lost faith in Steve Martinson, nor should you. I have not lost faith in Bruce Ramsey, nor should you.
Oh, okay.
And I think that there are a lot of high caliber coaches and players still out there ready to compete at this level.
I cannot wait for your reasoning for losing faith in Bruce Ramsey. No, not that I would, but I'm eager to hear yours. By the way, while I was digging up the stats for the article that I wrote yesterday, it's time for Maddie's stat of the show, and this one's a whopper. I'm surprised Barry Jansen doesn't have this. He's at ECHL Stats. Of the last 12 ECHL MVPs, there has been one repeat winner, Chad Costello. 7 of the 11 different winners, including Costello, went on to play for other teams their next season, whether it's in the ECHL or Europe. That's a pretty telling stat that the league really does have a hard time retaining high-end talent that wins MVPs, or maybe that the player who wins feels like that they want a new challenge, and that challenge is overseas. Maybe it actually, just throwing it out there, maybe it speaks to the fact that the ECHL plays too many games. I don't know.
I think one of the big parts about it is it's almost like one of that player's prizes for winning the MVP award is you've been given that opportunity to play overseas.
Right.
I think there's a lot of high caliber overseas opportunities that a lot of players don't get the chance to have.
Mm-hmm.
And by really showing off in this league, you're earning yourself a higher place over there, which could be good for your hockey career.
Congratulations. Let's go overseas.
I guess so. That's my try to keep a positive spin on it.
There you go. Man, I love this positive spin from you, bud. Why didn't we get this last year?
Because the Thunder were the positive spin. They covered it for me.
The Thunder was there. That's right.
Yeah, they covered it for me.
Fair enough.
So with that, we'll end our current talk about the ECHL Exodus. We'll keep you up to date with what's going on in both Wichita, Allen, and then of course across the league as well. But in our third period, we're going to go through some of our takes. You could call it a little too early. You could call it way too early. You could call it significantly too early. But these are our predictions for the ECHL season. You and I have it put down as our bold, then bland, and then duh predictions. But I think it'd be more exciting to go from our duh predictions and work our way up the Stephen A scale in hot takes. And
all right.
Start with our duh predictions and what we think are pretty much facts at this point.
So duh number one for me is Toledo and Fort Wayne will battle it out, easy for me to say, for the Central Division title.
I think it's one of the easiest ones to look at.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they are out of the talks, because they are certainly not out of the talks, and they play to the last game every year.
Mm-hmm.
But having a new coach there with the Cyclones is going to adjust things a little bit. You're not going to have that Matt Thomas mentality, and night one, you're already over 500 and you don't dip back under 500 the rest of the season.
Yeah.
There's possibility that they are not going to have the same start that they usually have. And I think that opens the door wide open for two teams that are hungry for success. And in the case of Fort Wayne, can't get enough.
Yeah. They have the target and the chip squarely on their shoulder this year of repeating as champions and doing it in a 27-team league, because I guarantee you the other 14 will be like, well, you didn't do it against us.
Yeah.
So that's a huge chip for them to have on their shoulder. And it's a little bit of a duh in my mind because death, taxes, Toledo and Fort Wayne 1-2 in the Central Division all the way to the end of the season. I don't want to tell you who wins the division quite yet. I don't know. But we'll let you know in the appropriate time who wins the division. Probably one of those two teams.
Make sure you're around Thanksgiving time.
Right.
Let's put it that way.
I'll let you know the final week of the season. How about that?
Yeah.
The other duh for me is Ryan Bednard is going to win ECHL Goaltender of the Year. This is slightly hot. This is a slightly hot take. But Ryan Bednard last year led the league with 4 shutouts on a Greenville team that allowed over 200 goals. Now he's going to go and in all likelihood be 1 or 1A there with Hunter Shepard in South Carolina. Look out.
Big time.
You're not going to score against this guy. He's Jeff Jakaitis.
It's going to be a very tough crease to get a puck across.
Yes. So that's my duh number 2 that he wins ECHL Goalie of the Year.
My first duh is that Allen will make the playoffs despite no affiliation as of yet and the heavy losses. This is a Steve Martinson that finds talent in the rough.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned it about Bruce Ramsey. AHL camps haven't even started, and that is where guys like Bruce Ramsey and Steve Martinson just get the plate out like a buffet and take the best pickings. Right. I think you're going to see both Bruce Ramsey and Steve Martinson pick up 2 or 3 really high caliber, low end AHL players who get taken off at camps. And I think that's going to be the success key for both those teams. Barry Jansen mentioned in an article a couple weeks ago that there are talks that Chad Costello could be returning to Allen as well. That's an unreal veteran. If you're a first-year pro player and you get to play alongside him, that is a very high-level player to begin your career with, and I think that could be what ends up doing it. I'm not saying Allen's going to win the division, but I'm saying that Allen will be one of the 4 teams in the Kelly Cup playoffs competing for the Mountain Division.
So your death, taxes, and Steve Martinson in the playoffs.
Yeah, pretty much.
Fair enough. And you're absolutely right. Chad Costello is going to make any – Chad Costello is the Sebastian Tunnell of the ECHL. No matter what line you put him on, he's going to make that line infinitely better immediately, right away. Say what you will about his injury history. That's valid. But Chad Costello has gone out there with his injury history still and won 2 league MVP, three league MVPs, and is a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer in this league. To sign him opens the door, I think, to much higher caliber players coming in there. And don't overlook this now. I mean, it's not like Steve Martinson is out there signing scrubs. He signed Jackson Leaf. Brandon Truk is going there this year. So those are 2 high caliber players in addition to a rumored Chad Costello. Steve Martinson can get this team to the playoffs without an affiliation, period. You heard it here first.
And then before I move away from this point, I said I'd also mention why I haven't lost faith in Bruce Ramsey. Bruce Ramsey is also the type of guy who can find a veteran who will lead a team. Mm-hmm. I think he did that with Ryan White last year because I think Ryan White gave this team a jolt of energy. He didn't really give us the offensive potential that we thought he might, but when he was on the ice, you and I defined it as this team had a new swagger. And I think there is a veteran out there somewhere that Bruce Ramsey will bring in that can be not like him, not exactly like him, but a form of Chad Costello as a guy where your young players can look up to and try to work through. Maybe that is a Jacob Graves who's got a couple of years of experience under his belt and plays the game well. Maybe that's the type of guy you want your guys looking up to. Of course, a lot of them already know him from last year, or maybe it is a guy with even more experience. But I think Bruce Ramsey also has that gift to find a veteran who's going to help the team out like that.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. And maybe you're right. Maybe it is Jacob Graves. You and I talked about it, that it was a different swagger initially, but when the Bloom fell off the rose with the officials. Then the act got old.
Yeah.
And
I
it
think that's a
was
good
it was
place.
a zero-sum game. Like, why have him out there if he's just going to go take a penalty and you're shorthanded?
Yeah.
You know? But I don't know.
The first 3 games inside Interest Bank Arena after that signing were electric.
Oh yeah.
But unfortunately, it fell off. But
Yeah.
I think that, and that's why I say that you want a guy more aligned with Chad Costello than aligned with Ryan White.
Absolutely.
But you want a guy who's gonna show your young players the right way to play in this league.
Absolutely.
And I have faith in Bruce Ramsey to find a guy like that.
I would take a team full of Gary Steffes-like players every single day and twice on Sunday. I would take a team full of that player. And if you aren't familiar with him or you're new to the ECHL and you don't know what we're talking about, YouTube Gary Steffes. He's that kind of player. He's my kind of hockey player.
Yeah. Well, then my second prediction is that the league's champion is going to come from the Western Conference.
Duh.
You mentioned 2 of them, Toledo and Fort Wayne. Those are 2 explosive teams that I think are going to make it very hard for anyone else to win a league title. Consider Indy as well. Consider Cincinnati. That Central Division is likely what the Kelly Cup will have to go through.
The Western Conference just plays a different brand of hockey. Out east, you want to get up and down and you want to outscore your opponent 6-5 and you want to play a defensive struggle game, whatever. But there is a lack of physicality in the Eastern Conference. Out west, man, this is a bring your lunch conference. You look at Newfoundland, and I think that they played that way. They out Western Conferenced Toledo in the year that they won, and I thought that Newfoundland played more like a Western Conference team than an Eastern Conference team in the year that they won. But I mean, that's why I think it's 8 of the last 9 Kelly Cup champions have come from the Western Conference. The West just plays a more physical, in-your-face brand of hockey, and yeah, they can score, but it's also going to be a dogfight, war of attrition, and you better bring your lunch every single night.
If you're a fan of an Eastern Conference team and haven't got the opportunity to watch 2 Western Conference teams go at it, I highly suggest trying to go find, if you've got the Flow Sports package, go back and watch a couple from last year.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't realize how night and day it was until I really invested into watching some of the Eastern Conference games last year. And it's almost night and day. It is incredible to see how different just those 2 conferences play hockey. So that's my defense of that duh statement.
That's not a duh. I mean, well, it is a duh, but you know, I completely agree with it. I mean, I think that you will see the Kelly Cup champion come out from this conference again this year. Yeah.
So our next little group is the bland predictions, maybe a 4 or 5 on the Stephen A scale. And I'll let you lead off with that one too.
So I really like what Norfolk has done here this year with the affiliation that they've secured with Chicago and the Carolina Hurricanes. I think that anytime you're able to pair up with those 2 franchises, you're going to get good players. And the group in the Tidewater, that fan base has been beleaguered for a long time, since probably the AHL days. And that fan base out there is craving a winner. I think that this is the year that they get in, and they will be the 4th team from the South to make the Kelly Cup playoffs this year.
That's a loaded division.
It is.
Although, what division's not loaded, I guess, is what the better way to say that.
That's true.
So I like that pick, though.
I've had Norfolk before, and they've let me down. I really hope they don't do it again.
Well, you've got a hungry Jacksonville. Let's start off by saying it's likely Florida, South Carolina, Greenville in those top 3 spots.
Yeah, pick a hat between them as your division champion.
But you've got a really hungry Jacksonville team that is going to be coming for that spot as well. That I think between them and Norfolk could produce some really energetic Friday, Saturday, Sunday series out there in the South.
Well, and don't don't overlook Atlanta either with
Yeah.
head coach Jeff Pyle, who's an ECHL Hall of Fame caliber coach too. So,
Yeah.
Man, that South division is going to be loaded for bear as well.
It's going to be a good one.
Yep. The other bland prediction for me is Tato Had is going to be your ECHL Coach of the Year. I stole it from you.
Sounds familiar.
Sounds familiar. It should be, but I know you believed it in your bones last year. I believe it in mine this year. I think that Kansas City is set up to be one of those 4 teams in the Mountain Division that makes the playoffs. With a player with a goaltending coach like Josh Robinson, who is Mr. Maverick there in the pipes for that franchise. And then Riley Weslowski, who came up from Wichita and just brings a pedigree all of his own. I really love that addition to the staff there of both of those guys for Tato Had. And he's gone out and gotten and signed some studs here in the offseason as well. So this seems like a different Kansas City team from one who puts who wins a championship on paper and then they fall flat on the ice. This to me feels different. This feels like the start of the rise of Florida in the ECHL South from a few years ago. And if Tato Had's going to be there for a long time, this is the year that they break out, and this is the year that he wins ECHL Coach of the Year.
Yeah, before I even saw your notes on this, on our little cheat sheet that you and I use, when I was thinking of my ideas, one of my bland predictions originally was going to be Kansas City wins the Mountain Division in the regular season and represents the Mountain Division in the Final Four. But I decided against it for a couple other different ones. Okay. But I fully believe that is probably the best coaching staff all around in the ECHL. That is rock solid coaching.
Yeah.
There's not one guy on that staff who will not demand respect and earn respect from every single player on the bench. And I think Kansas City is going to likely make every single Mountain Division team pretty much fight for their lives all year long.
Yeah, they're going to have a huge say in what happens in that Mountain Division this year for sure.
Yeah. For my first bland prediction, I've got Greenville winning the South Division. I think Florida's reign down there has finally come to an end, and I think South Carolina gets passed up. And I think that Greenville sparked enough last year that they've got a really solid fan base now really behind them. They've got strong affiliation vows going through, and I think you've got a potential to succeed in a very difficult division. And if you can succeed in a COVID year like last year, in a East that got really tough with the move of Indy over there once they added Fort Wayne over to the West, you have proven yourself in a tough environment. This is the year that you put yourself on the map for good, and I've got them winning the South.
Yeah. And you push the ECHL, the eventual Eastern Conference champion and representative in the Kelly Cup Finals, South Carolina Stingrays, to Game 4 of the East Final there in the playoffs earlier this summer. I love the job Andrew Lord has done there. I think he's going to be a tremendous head coach for years to come there in South Carolina, in Greenville. No doubt in my mind that they can continue to build off of the momentum that they had just a few months ago. And I definitely could see Greenville being a division champion this year and being one of those Final Four teams when we get to late May, early June, playing for a conference title once again.
And Lord really should have been a coach of the year. Any other year that he's a coach of the year.
Absolutely.
But Bruce Ramsey had such a solid year of bringing in talent every single month to build his team and make him better and better that it was you couldn't not give it to him. But Lord did some amazing things down there. Any other year, he's definitely a coach of the year. I think a lot of that success is going to pour over, and I'm very eager to see how hockey goes down there in Greenville this year.
Yeah, it should be fun for sure.
My second bland pick is a little higher on the Stephen A scale, maybe goes up towards a bold prediction.
Ooh.
But Utah will fail to make the playoffs. And had you asked me what my picks were last week, this is not one of my picks. But I think the loss of Tim Branham hurts this franchise enough. The reasoning behind that is they've only have 7 guys signed to the team so far.
Okay.
And of those 7, that includes Connor McDonald, who has 8 total ECHL games. He's also got 5 in the AHL.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Bowen, who has only played in the SPHL, had 30 points in 28 games with Macon last year. I guess he has 14 ECHL games in his career. He's going to be the most experienced ECHL guy on this team so far.
Wow.
Austin Crossley comes in with just 2 professional games in Sweden, and that's it when it comes to his professional resume.
Mm-hmm.
Garrett Metcalf played 9 games with him between the pipes last year. He's the returner that is probably going to be the guy they hopefully rely on this year. He's got, like I said, 9 games in the ECHL. Tyler Pinner had 12 points in 30 SPHL games last year. Kyle Pouncey, we knew him from his time in Wichita, only 5 ECHL games, 1 point in that time. And then Mason Manick, who has 9 games in the ECHL as well. There are certain players around the league who played more games last year alone than this entire group has played together in the ECHL. That's a tough group to have to work around now that you don't have the head coach that really has put Utah on the map when it comes to the ECHL in the past few years. I think it's going to be hard for them to bring talent around an already struggling 7 guys, and it's going to be hard to have a team that can compete in the Mountain Division, which could easily get run away by some of these teams.
Would your view of it change if Colorado were to send them significant help, as in 8 to 10 players?
If you're able to get 8 to 10 players, it totally changes things because I guess they do have the advantage of being so close to their affiliate,
right?
That helps. But I think you still have to have a veteran from the ECHL that can really show the way around this league. And a couple of talented young guys from the AHL might not be enough when it comes to having success in this league. Because I think you and I saw it a ton last year. The teams that were the most successful were the ones that had role models who know how to compete in this league. The ECHL is very different when it comes to competing than it is in the AHL.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that you really need 1 or 2 big name veterans to come in here for this team to still be permanently on the map this year. Otherwise, I think they could slip out of that top 4 in the Mountain.
That's fair. I'm not ready to put that in them. I'm not ready to put that on them yet.
That's why it's a bland take.
Right. Yeah. You know, we're not ready to Stephen A. sultry this yet, but that's a fairly bland, boldish pick.
It lies between bland and bold.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there. It's gray area.
It's moving up in the gray. So
yeah.
So I that's fair reasoning. And you might have the similar situation happen in Wichita. Like, who do the young players? You and I talked about this even yesterday. Who do they look up to in a game where there's, it's tied at 3 with 40 seconds left in regulation? Like, what do we do here? We're rookies, first, second, third year players. Like, what do we do? And what's the system? And especially early in the year, that's when you lean on those veteran players to really instill the system in you and work extra after practice to get that to help you learn the system. Going to be crucial early in the year for teams who have gone through such a phase change, if you will, here in the off season, and the teams who can come out of that and just keep right on moving, like a Fort Wayne and even Kansas City to some extent, out east, Florida and South Carolina. If they can come out of that and just keep on moving, I think that serves them very well early in the season. And everybody else who's had to struggle early on with learning the systems and things like that, it's a bit of a catch-up process as we get into January, February, and March.
Yeah, and that's why I say that 8 to 10 send-downs from Colorado does not change my opinion on Utah, because you still need that guy you turn to in a 3-3, 40 seconds left, and 8 more rookies might not be what it takes. So
right, yeah, there's nobody there to reinforce what's being taught or reinforce the right way to do it.
Yeah.
That's a fair point.
So we'll move on to our bold predictions, getting close to Max Kettleman and Stephen A. At 10 a.m. this morning on First Take. I'll let you lead off again.
So my first bold take is that the league scoring champion will be a rookie this year. And don't ask me why I did this, but I guess because I just want to see anarchy. I want to see the rookie of the year in the ECHL be the scoring champion, which means because nobody votes, nobody looks at anything else other than the most points, he's got to be the MVP. I kind of want to see that. So I went with anarchy here, and I think that a rookie will lead the league in scoring this year.
I like that. I really like that.
But if that rookie gets out hot, there's no way he's staying. No way.
That's the tough part.
Yeah.
That's the tough one.
Yeah. The other one for me is a bold, blandish one, kind of like what we had in the last segment. And I think that Trois Rivières will make the Kelly Cup playoffs in their first year in the ECHL, similar to what the Newfoundland Growlers did in their first year in the ECHL. And they may even play a best-of-7 series between those two clubs. So I think that would be a great series. I think that that's a bold prediction, a bold, blandish one, if you will.
Well, and bringing in Diaus, Bodine, Archambault, Brodeur, and Gagnon on day one of free agency sets you up to be a pretty good team in this league.
Oh, yeah. Those are 5 really good players at this
big
level.
Time.
Yeah.
Well, I'll move into my first of my 2, and mine are, now that I look at them again, maybe trending up towards the hotter of the bold prediction takes. My first one is that 3 of the 4 divisions will not have the first seed decided until at least April 10th. And if you need to know your dates, April 16th is when every single team except 2 finish their season. The 17th, there's 1 game. But that's 1 week before the season ends, and I don't think we're going to know 3 of the 4 top seeds in the Kelly Cup playoffs. The one division I think we'll know, I think Kansas City will have the top of the Mountain Division secured before April 10th. As for everybody else, they're fighting to the last night.
Oof. I love that because I love that. That's from the editor in me and the content provider in me. That is music to my ears. I love it.
And it's very plausible.
Oh, yeah.
I think all 3 of those divisions have 2 teams at the top who have really set themselves aside and are going to be hard to play against. Maybe even 3 in every single one of those divisions.
Very possible.
So that's the one that I am going to make sure I come back to come end of March, early April to see where we're at. So
yes.
And then my final one is that 3 of the top 5 records in the ECHL will come from the South Division. I think Florida, Greenville, and South Carolina will host 3 of those top 5 records in the ECHL. I think this is no slight to the other teams, but I think there's such a gap between those teams and Atlanta, Jacksonville, and Norfolk that they can pile up some wins within the division, where everywhere else in the league, the divisions are so almost even that it's a give or take almost every single night. But I think those 3 teams have set themselves far enough aside that they might be able to pick up a few extra wins and set themselves far aside from the rest of the league.
It does always seem like the South Division has kind of the haves and the have-nots, if you will. So I could easily see that happening again this year. I want to go back to that prediction. How many of those teams, of the 5 teams, do you think, of those 3 of the 5 spots, how many of those teams do you think have more than 100 points?
I think you maybe have 1 team in the ECHL this year hit 100 points. I think the Central, the Mountain, and the North are all spread a little bit closer together. You're going to have kind of like it was last year. We had 1 team, maybe I don't even remember now. Maybe Rapid City climbed their way out, or It wasn't Rapid. They did climb their way out of 500. So we only did have one team at the end of the year under 500 in the league. And I think that this year you're going to see a lot of that as well in the North, the Central, and the Mountain Division, that a lot of those teams are going to be near 500 because it's really give or take either every single night which team is going to come out on top. The South is really the only one that I see a clear division so far between the tops and the bottom. Of course, in 28 days' time, that could all change. So
That's
this
right.
is all from just some signings and who you bring back. But I'm eager to come back to this list and say January, February, and see where we're at.
Well, let's save the old Google Doc, and when we're in Jacksonville and we're doing one of these deals, let's revisit it.
That sounds good. That sounds good.
Sounds good. So we're going to work a little overtime here this evening, and this is the 9th anniversary of one of the best coaching rants we've ever heard. Ladies and gentlemen, the Oklahoma State football coach, I forgot. I'm drawing a blank on his name.
I got you if you need me.
All right, I got you.
It's Mike Gundy, and it's 14 years.
14
yesterday.
Okay, so anyway, we're giving this. We're saying happy 14th birthday to one of the best rants ever, ladies and gentlemen, Michael Gundy.
Where are we at in society today? Come after me. I'm a man. I'm 40. I'm not a kid. Write something about me or our coaches. Don't write about a kid that does everything right, that's heart's broken, and then say that the coaches said he was scared. That ain't true. And then to say that we made that decision because Donovan Woods, because he threatened to transfer, that's not true. So get your facts straight. And I hope someday you have a child and somebody downgrades them and belittles them, and you have to look them in the eye and say, you know what? It's okay. They're supposed to be mature adults, but they're really not. Who's the kid here? Who's the kid here? Are you kidding me? That's all I got to say. Makes me want to puke.
That press conference was exactly 1 minute and 15 seconds long.
Yeah, that was it.
He walked in and he found the person out who is a sports reporter from KFOR in Oklahoma City, and he made sure every mic was hot and every camera was on him, and it was on. That's one of the best rants ever.
And for a quote taken out of context, if you've ever played a pickup game of basketball and not used "I'm a man, I'm 40," you haven't played pickup basketball right. That's from the old Buco gym. I can say that.
You just walk up to somebody after hitting a three and being like, "Oh,
I'm a man. I'm 40.
Oh, get some."
Big time.
So that leads us to share with you our favorite coaching rants ever as we finish up the show. So I guess I'll take the lead here. I've got a couple. I love Jim Mora, but probably my favorite one ever has to be the late Dennis Green of the Minnesota Vikings, or actually he was of the Minnesota Vikings and then went to Arizona, and they played the Chicago Bears and lost the game to the Chicago Bears. And this was Denny Green's reaction after the game.
4 picks against Grossman and 2 fumbles. What did you see about the Bears? We shut them down that way?
No, we just the Bears are what we thought they were. What we thought they were. We played them in preseason. Who the hell takes a third game in a preseason like it's bull? We played them in the third game. Everybody played 3 quarters. The Bears are who we thought they were. And that's why we took the damn field. Now, if you want to crown them, then crown their ass. But they are who we thought they were. And we let them off the hook.
It gets better.
Thanks, Coach.
The best part, like there are 3 or 4 different good parts in that quote, in that rant. But the best part for me is the media handler off mic as Denny Green's walking out. Thanks, Coach. Like, see you later. There he goes. Thanks, Coach.
And I'm speaking to every single student journalist out there. If you haven't had it yet, you will have the uncomfortable interview at the end that you have to go. Thanks, Coach. In fact, it was my very first one in sports media. The very first one as a student journalist I had, I got yelled at from a coach. He didn't mean to, and I had to give him the thanks, Coach, because I was terrified.
It wasn't with me, was it?
No, this was back at Butler.
Okay. So
and it's just they've created for some of the best videos out there, but if you're a journalist coming up, we're with you. It happens.
Oh yeah. Uncomfortable interviews happen all the time.
I feel every single bit of pain in his voice with thanks, Coach.
Yeah, exactly. That's my favorite one ever. And well, not my favorite one ever. My favorite one ever is Tommy Lasorda, and it's very NSFW. So do yourself a favor and go search Tommy Lasorda Bevacqua, BEVAQUA or something like that.
CQUA, yeah.
CQUA, Bevacqua. And he's like, Tommy Lasorda is talking about hitting Pete Bevacqua in a game he played for the San Diego Padres. And Tommy Lasorda is like, well, I'm not going to hit him. The guy's hitting 130. He couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat. Bleep, 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 bleep. And he's talking like, you know what? I'd go send a limo for his ass to make sure he stood in the box so that I could hit him. And it's tremendous.
It's something else.
Tommy Lasorda I always viewed Tommy Lasorda as kind of the grandpa of baseball.
Yeah.
But then you go and you find some of these rants that he has. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
You hear him just go on a 5-second long beat rant and know exactly what he's saying, word for word.
Pretty
beep,
much.
beep, Bevacqua, beep, 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 all the way through. Tremendous. That's
I sent you the Mike Gundy clip earlier today, and I said, how can we fit this into the podcast tonight? And then you asked me, what's your favorite, press conference rant out there? And immediately I typed out Jim Mora because I knew that was my first one.
Right.
But then my true feelings came out to who I always get mixed up. Tony Dungy / Herm Edwards, who are one and the same in my mind. Sorry if you're a huge fan or a huge hater of one of the two. They're the same guy in my book.
Sure.
But Herm Edwards houses my favorite one, at least.
Oh wait. Well, let's do this. Hang on.
Oh,
this is what's great about sports. This is what the greatest thing about sports is. You play to win the game. Hello? You play to win the game. You don't play to just play it. That's the great thing about sports. You play to win. And I don't care if you don't have any wins. You go play to win. When you start telling me it doesn't matter, then retire. Get out. Because it matters.
I mean, he's not wrong.
And that's one of the best press conference walks you ever see. He doesn't ever get out in front of the podium, but he gets on top of that podium a couple times.
Oh yeah.
And it's a fantastic clip. And
hello.
I have a video of that saved onto my phone. And every time I win a week of fantasy football, I send it to whoever I beat. It's anytime that K-State beats KU, I find my KU friends and send it to them.
No, you won't. No, you won't. No, you won't.
It is my favorite clip. I told you and I had to look for some John Tortorella. Even John Tortorella doesn't come close to a Herm Edwards for me. That one is, I love it.
Yeah, I looked for a Torts rant, and there's not one that I didn't have to put some work into to get all the beeps and everything done with that and make it show appropriate. So we'll table the torts for right now, but he's definitely in the Hall of Fame of all-time coaching rants.
He's a person that's in the Hall of Fame. A lot of these other guys just have statements that are in the Hall of Fame. Torts he's got the full bust in the Hall of Fame. He's got the gold jacket. He's got the whole thing.
Is it John Tortorella and Bobby Knight, or is it Bobby Knight and John Tortorella?
Well, Bobby Knight doesn't have a bust. He has a chair. But
that's true. And a whip.
Yeah. But yeah, he's definitely there as well.
Yeah. Good old Bobby Knight.
Well, I think we might have exceeded the NHL 5-minute and maybe even the ECHL 7-minute overtime rules here.
Probably.
But
it was well.
We had a good time. We let you know what our favorite coaching rants are. If you've got some that we didn't mention, make sure you throw them in the comments, whether you're watching this live now or you're watching back or listening later. Let us know your favorite ones, and we'll make sure we go take a look at those so that we can all reminisce together. But any closing thoughts from you after a podcast?
It was a good rabbit hole to get down today, to go look for those and cut them up. So I do want to leave you with this, because you mentioned Jim Mora. So here you go.
Playoffs.
There you go. There's a little bit of playoffs from Grandpa Jim.
Playoffs.
Since we've been talking about playoffs, because we already know who's making the playoffs right now, right?
Right. Yeah. We don't even need to play the game.
Yeah.
Another good podcast. We're working on getting a guest from the Fort Wayne Comets for the next podcast, the defending champion Fort Wayne Comets, either Ben Boudreau or their broadcaster, Shane Albarani. Shane, I probably put you on the spot there. But hopefully we'll have one of those or both, maybe one. Who knows? Next week, a couple of weeks on the podcast. And then, brother, we're off and rolling here.
Pretty much. Yeah. To put that all kind of into dates for you, in 2 weeks' time, we'll meet once more for our final off-season edition of the Three Periods podcast. That'll be on October 7th. Then on October 21st, we'll meet for our big grand opening of the ECHL season. That's going to be a packed week here at Field Pass. We're planning on doing our own style of media days across the ECHL to kind of give you an inside look at some of the teams. We'll have special pieces of that here on the podcast for you, I'm sure. And right there on that, I think it's that 21st, we have game one of the season that night, and then the full slate gets started the next night on the 22nd. And just like that, we are into it. And we'll be with you every single Thursday evening live, or if you miss it live, it'll come out on Friday mornings. And we'll get you set for every single weekend of ECHL hockey leading on through. And it's going to be here before we know it. And then we're going to be at the playoffs before we know it. And this is going to be a fun year to cover. And I know in the next couple of weeks, you and I'll keep a close eye on what's going on in the NHL camps and eventually the AHL camps to see what talent could be leaking down this way. And if we've got notes worthy of it, we'll make sure we inform you on next podcast.
Absolutely.
Well, that'll do it for Matthew Harding and I. Thank you for joining us on another edition of the Three Periods podcast here on Field Pass Hockey, whether you're joining us on YouTube, Facebook Live, or on Twitter for the very first time tonight. We thank you for participating. We thank you for taking the time out of your evening, and we hope to see you in 2 weeks' time on October 7th with the next edition of the Three Periods podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
You've been listening to the Three Periods podcast. Do you have a topic you'd like discussed? Hit us up on Twitter at 3periodspod with the hashtag TPP on FPH. And for the latest news on the ECHL and minor league hockey, visit fieldpasshockey.com.
They're going home. Thanks, Coach.